Hello, Caimh. Nice to see you.
Very nice to be here.
Lovely. So you're over in Manchester?
I am. I'm in Manchester, which is bizarrely was very sunny for the last few days. It's not anymore, which is why I've got a light on. But yeah, it's Manchester is my adopted home now. Has been for quite a while.
All right. So
Cool.
question one. Um, so you've written, as you know, for TV comedy shows, the Sarah Millican television program, Mock the Week, and Have I Got News for You, as well as creating the BAFTA-nominated CBBC show Pet Squad. I expect we have some of the writers, young writers watching who love to write for television. So what advice could you give to those guys?
Good question. I think one of the biggest things is probably it sounds a bit simple, but actively think about what you're watching when you're watching TV. In the sense that like it's good if you're watching a sitcom, like take Friends, which I believe everybody still watches. I think even now younger kids, but take any show like that you like. A really useful thing if you want to be a TV writer, particularly in the sort of sitcom area, is maybe watch an episode, write down for yourself who are the core characters, because it's useful to kind of understand sort of a little bit behind the scenes. So if you write Friends, for example, the six core characters are always in it every episode, but it's good to you sort of note them, and then you note there's occasional characters that come up like Gunter, the guy who works in the coffee shop or something like that, and there's a couple of more. And it's useful then maybe if you really want to have a look at it, is to go through an episode and actually plot out what happens. Like this scene happens with these characters, and maybe even put it in different colors for yourself, and you can just see the flow of it, which is great because it's really useful to if you want to write scripts. It's really useful to read scripts. Like I actually, when I was a TV, I only started writing novels relatively recently. Before that, I was always just reading books of scripts, and nowadays it's great. You can because back, about 10 years ago, you used to be able to buy film scripts and stuff. I'm sure you sort of and you still can, but these days almost all of them are free on the internet somewhere if you go looking. So you can read if you find any show you like, go looking for a script and read the script and kind of see. Then you'll sort of start, even just for enjoyment, read the script, but you start thinking in script. So when it comes to writing a script, your brain is more used to that process. I think that's just things like that. I mean, that's for sitcom, and then for sort of writing other things like panel shows, or which are like the Sarah Millican show was a comedy show where we sort of helped writing the jokes for the start bits and interview questions and stuff. If you like a certain panel show or something, which I know they have in Australia as well, they're not. It's weird. Panel shows are very popular in Britain, and I think they have some in Australia, and that format doesn't really work in America for some reason. But the principle's the same. Like they start talking about a topic. If you watch any kind of thing, a great thing to do if you really, really want to be serious about being a sort of comedy writer like that is watch a panel show, record your favorite panel show or whatever kind of show. When somebody asks a question, the host asks a question, it's setting up a gags for the rest of them to do gags, jokes. So pause it, give yourself 5 minutes and go, how would I answer that question? What would I say here that's funny? And like just put down your thoughts and then watch what those people do. And then you'll kind of go, all right, yeah, I had some, you can see the process that they went through rather than just because to kind of spoil a lot of these programs for people if they don't know, a lot of the time when you see people sort of come up with bits on the spot, they're not. They're written beforehand. They kind of know some of the questions. Like a lot of stuff is come up with the spot, but a lot of it is also, especially anything to do with the news and all that. They give people the questions sort of, they have like a day and they try and write some ideas down. Yeah, and those kind of things. So if you want to do as a kind of exercise for yourself, put yourself in the shoes of being on the show. And so every time somebody asks a question, pause it and give yourself a few minutes and go, what would I write here? Just as a fun exercise to see what you come up with. And it is good because you'll come up with some stuff they've come up with, and you come up with different stuff. And it's just a good way of training yourself, I think. But those would be the two different routes I take.
Yeah, oh, lovely. I'll put some links up. I think I think the BBC have a lot of scripts, and well, as you say, there's probably a lot of different websites out there with scripts on. So I'll share
Yeah,
that.
there's loads of different ones, and I know there is for like sitcoms and films and stuff. Because I wrote a lot of children's TV. I wrote cartoon series, as you mentioned, Pet Squad. I also wrote something called Bear Behaving Badly, and a couple of other things. And those are basically writing anything like that is that's all good training and educational and stuff. Because like people sort of, I have occasionally people sort of smirk and go, "Oh, you wrote kids children's TV," and I was like, Yeah, that was the best thing that ever happened to me. Was I wrote a load of children's television
Mm.
programs, and it was great because all writing is fundamentally problem solving. It's all figuring out, right, these people need to get to here via, how do we get through all these things? So they're all sort of coming, getting over obstacles, dealing with certain characters, all these kind of things. So the more you write something where you have to have characters working with each other and all that sort of stuff in any format is great. And kids TV was brilliant for me to write because like I had to write literally a show called Bear Behaving Badly, which I'm sure if you look up on YouTube, it's there. It was very popular for quite a long time on children's BBC in Britain. And it was like their highest rated show for quite a few years, I think. But the little blue bear in it, Nev, had his entire vocabulary was, I think it was 84 words that he could say. So you had to write a script where whatever Nev would say would be one of those words. And like, I remember even the thing was like, you can't come up with any new words. I was actually the lead writer, so I was there when we'd find the word list. So I was able to maybe get a couple of more on if I could come up with a really good reason why we'd have to have him be able to say something. But yeah, and even then he was like saying yeah, and Jebediah was a word he had, and which was just a random yay word that I think didn't even make any sense in English. But yeah, but those kind of things, that they're all sort of challenging things to do, and anything like that makes you a better writer. You can basically do whatever you can. If you approach it in the right way, it will make you better because you'll learn from the experience.
Okay, yeah, that's great. I've actually got quite a limited vocabulary, so I do understand.
Don't we all?
Just it's not one of the questions, but just occurred to me a question. What made you decide to transition from TV to writing novels, or is it like a long held thing?
Yeah, I was kind. To be honest, I sort of had. I got asked that years. You get asked it quite regularly when you're sort of, would you ever write a novel? And I honestly was like, no. They're massive. Look, this. I mean, look at a book. I mean, seriously, if you've not written one, look, you pick one up and you go, God, look at all there's loads of words in that. Look at the pages. Do you know what I mean? Like they seem horribly intimidating. I can remember being really intimidated by the idea. And then I had the idea for a book. This must have been back in about maybe 7 years ago now or something. I had the idea for a kind of thrillery book, a sort of James Bond type thing. And I tried starting to write it and realized I didn't know what I was doing. So then I did a course in the University of Manchester. I did a master's to learn how writing worked, how prose writing worked, as opposed to all the script thing I'd done. And then I started writing short stories as practice, which I highly recommend, by the way, for any writers, especially because loads of people try and write a novel and all that sort of things, and they are big, intimidating things. Whereas a short story can be a couple of thousand words, and they're great because they're wonderful practice, and they also it's something it's easier to achieve to finish it, and then you can get feedback and stuff, and that's what makes you better. So I always say to any writers at any age level, start by writing short stories has always been my advice, and I'm always amazed I don't hear that more as advice, to be honest. So I started writing lots of short stories. And then one of them accidentally turned into a novel, and I thought I was writing the novel just as a sort of, I can remember the time thinking I'm not going to try and get it published. I was just going to try and write it just to write it and see if I could. And that ended up being A Man at One of Those Faces, which was my first book. And it's just sort of ended up that way. But yeah, so it didn't happen by accident, but it became a big surprise. And then it sort of took over from everything else, which was very unexpected.
So you said, sorry, I'm veering off course here a little bit.
That's right.
You did you say you did a master's in
I didn't complete it. I basically did the useful bits because we did workshops with all the students, and we'd come in and read bits out that we'd written. And I think it was like, there was like maybe 15 of us in the class or something like that. And what we do is every week, supposedly 3 of us would come in and we'd have written something. We'd send it to everyone beforehand. We'd read out a little bit and then we'd all discuss it, which was great. And then other people sort of didn't get their stuff done. So what ended up happening was because I was writing more I was doing a lot of writing that time, I kind of ended up filling in quite a bit. So we ended up doing my stuff quite a bit just because I always had something. And it was great, I think, because I came from a stand-up comedy background. And the thing about stand-up comedy is it's instant feedback. If people love or hate what you're doing, you
Mm.
find out really fast,
Mm.
which is, a blessing and a curse. And it was great for me as a stand-up that I was able to get that positive feedback kind of early on when I was doing these things. And I think it got me excited about writing more and more. So it's very important to get encouragement and to be with positive people, to sort of give each other that encouragement. And that's the same really in any form of the arts. Like a couple of my closest friends, one in particular, Gary, a guy called Gary Delaney, who's a very successful comedian now in Britain. I used to support him on tour, and Sarah Millican, who's his wife. Both of them are very big names in British comedy now. But like I started off with Gary, I met him on my 5th or 6th gig, and people start stand-up comedy. You're basically always awful at it when you start. You just are. You're not going to be good at it. But the most important thing you kind of get a support structure of meeting other people in the same position, and you kind of bond. So that's why it's important to kind of work with other people when you can. Just not work, but sort of support them. You support them, they support you, because you keep each other going and you sort of give each other good, positive feedback, and it really does help. So writing's quite a solitary thing, so it's always good to have other people around you. And then and it's amazing then seeing people go on to do great things. As I've been lucky enough, I know quite a few people who've sort of started off with me and are now household names, which is lovely. I can't remember what the original question was. Where did I end up? How close did I get to it?
You hit the nail on the head. Yeah.
Oh, good.
So question 2. So you have set many of your books in the place where you lived at the time, so Dublin and in Manchester, and I know some of it is set, as you mentioned, in America. Where you haven't lived in America, have you? Or?
No, I've kind of went there for research, but I've never lived there. No.
So the question is, can you tell our younger writers your thoughts on what makes a good setting and the pros and cons of setting the story close to home?
Good question. I mean, I think the great thing about setting it somewhere, like I wrote it in Dublin. I haven't actually lived in Dublin for 25 years, pretty much. No, it was probably 24 or 23 maybe. Something like that. But it's in my head. It's where I grew up. So the big advantage of me writing something in Dublin is the rhythm of the speech of the people from there. It's just in my head. Like I can, I can sort of instantly come up with a conversation from 2 people from Dublin and just sort of flow with it in my head, even though I don't do voices and stuff, but I can. The rhythm is in my head. So that's useful in the sense that it comes a bit more naturally to you, I think. So that's, I think, why I started writing there, and then I wrote the books. I've written quite a few books set in Dublin because of that. And it was also nice for me. It was kind of a weird sort of coming home thing, because while I obviously go over there quite a lot to visit my relatives, it was fun for me to write things based in Dublin, because I was remembering various things about it and stuff. And look, you also, the geography of the place and stuff, and you generally get like the traditions and the sort of names for things and all that correct. I mean, you can still get them wrong. Like, for example, a really silly thing, but Vauxhall cars, which are Opel cars, are called Vauxhall in Britain, as you would know. They're called Opel, I think, in the rest of Europe and in Ireland. I had an Opel Astra as my first car, and in my first book, I called it a Vauxhall and got very angry emails from people in Ireland because I got the name of the cars wrong. So there's little details like that you should be able to get right that I actually didn't. But so putting it somewhere, that's the advantage. But the great thing with writing is you can write things based anywhere. I mean, and I don't even mean like, forget this planet. You can do it anywhere in the solar system. You can make up an entire world for yourself, and you can make up, alternative versions of the reality and stuff. So I think that's one of these things that you have to sort of maybe give it more thought. When you do it somewhere, you kind of, there's already preset things, assuming you're doing it in the real world, that you will know. Whereas if you do it somewhere different, like the trickier thing is I've written books set in New York, and there you kind of have to go through, you just got to be aware of things like there's different names for things like sidewalk, pavement, and all those sort of things. And I mean, all those things are kind of manageable, but you do have to be careful about them. But the advantage of setting somewhere, like I've also written books in Manchester now where I live. And the great thing there is the things you kind of pick up walking around the city. that I sort of used. And also, to be honest, the lovely thing about writing something in the place that you live is you start taking a fresh look at the place you live. And I have a much deeper appreciation. I always liked Manchester, but now I've been around and kind of noticed things about architecture and stuff, because it's a weird thing for anyone living in a city and stuff like that. But I discovered when I started writing a book here, weirdly, I don't look up. By that I mean, like, I know buildings from sort of seeing the first couple of stories of them, but I don't really pay much attention. I've always got headphones on and walking around in the world on my own. And I started looking up and going, wow, this, and like noticing all this architecture that's actually really cool, and buildings look really interesting, and odd little things like that. But when you started more actively looking at the place because you had to describe it to somebody else, you learn it again. And it's really good that I've done the same with Dublin. I've gone back into Dublin and started doing research for certain things when I was looking at books there, and it is amazing. You see the place fresh. So yeah, there's I would say, if it suits your story to put it somewhere that you know, great, do that. But if not, don't worry about it, because ultimately, as long as you give it some thought, I think readers will believe it. As long as you believe it and you've given it some thought and you sort of, it's clear in your head, then you'll be fine.
Okay, yeah, that's a really interesting answer, actually. So more to it than maybe you would think. And I think Stranger Times is set in Manchester. If you want to check that out, I'll listen to the audio version at the moment. And yeah, very good book. I think, is it suitable for sort of teenagers, would you say? I'm trying to think.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, older teenagers would be fine with it. I know my nephew's reading it, and he's 14, so yeah. So yeah, I think so. Yeah, because it's more or less. I mean, there's if you watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer, put it that way, you'll be fine. So yeah, and the kids do watch that stuff, and teenagers do watch that stuff.
Okay, lovely. That's great. Thank you. So moving on to question 3. So I watched a little bit of one of your interviews before, and I noticed that you're talking passionately about good characters in books. So could you talk passionately to us and the young writers about why writing good characters is so important?
Okay, well, yeah, I mean, it is. I think people sort of ask, because I kind of get asked a lot about, because I said I do, I write generally funny stuff and all this sort of thing. But I'm a big believer in people don't. You'll see it with books, particularly where they go, it's a twisty book with a twisty thing coming, and it's all about what happens in the book. But I think the fundamental thing you have to remember as a writer is, while people want to know what happens, how whether it's a book or a film, whatever, when it really works, you want to know what happens to those people. You have to care about those people. Or, I'm not saying you have to love them and think they're wonderful, but you have to have some kind of investment, whether you love them, whether you hate them. There's lots of good shows where you've got characters that people really, really hate. And that's great if they really, really, like, as long as they have a passion, because they always want to see that character get their comeuppance or something like that. But we are programmed as people to interact with other human beings. And that's what we're doing when we're reading a story. It's fundamental. We're not actually, people don't live on their own in a bubble. We all, we're programmed to want, on some basic biological level, to sort of be part of a family and a clan and all that sort of thing. It's how human beings work. And so if you have to care about people, and you have to care about the people in the book, because I think that's the thing. People will just follow characters they love anywhere. Like even in TV shows, if you look at these TV shows that have ran 6 or 7 series, you'll have loads of fans saying, oh, series 3 wasn't very good, and series 5 was a great one and stuff. But the reason they stick with it is because they're invested, and what they're invested in is the characters. So it's one of those things that, and it's, I mean, there's all these things about how you write good characters and stuff like that. I think a big thing is, for me, I think you just sort of take little elements of people maybe, and give them character. Really, the best way character comes out is in dialogue, I think. And my best skill as a writer, I think anyone who even dislikes my books would probably say, is dialogue is my strength, where I can get people talking. And when you get people talking, that's when their character comes out. People are defined by what they say and what they do, really, in life and in books and in anything else. And if you can get them talking, that's how we sort of build them. And even when I'm planning stuff out, I will generally have an idea of the sort of basic plot points. But to get between A and B, to get two people in a car and get them from this point to that point, they have to be sitting in the car and have a conversation along the way. And the conversation along the way is the most fun bit to write in some ways, where you just let them. I've had them just make. I have my characters. I'm quite well known for having them to have very random conversations, where they're. I'm trying to think of a good example of random conversations. I've had my characters get annoyed about things they see in TV shows. I've got one thing where there's a thing that happens in TV and film where someone gets into a car and then somebody pops up in the back seat and they didn't know they were there. And it's like the scary thing. And it's been used in loads of different films and TV shows. And it really annoys me because it's not possible. I don't think you can get into a car and not notice somebody unless they disguise themselves of what the back furnishing of the car looks like, or there's something in the car like a sheet they can go under. And but I stuff like that, I took that and I gave it to one of my characters, Bunny, and he does a big rant about people popping up at the back of cars. And it was in a sort of, it's in a short story, and it's all about these two people trying to threaten them and all that. But the thing that everybody remembers about that short story is him going off in a big rant about this, about the thing, because and that kind of thing defines him, and that's the kind of thing we remember about people. And I think if you invest in a character by loving stuff like that about them and giving them a personality, then people care what happens to him as the story goes on. Whereas if it's somebody who's just if characters are a bit sort of two-dimensional and there's no real thing to them, you don't bond with them in the same way. And that's where a lot of films in particular go wrong, I think, because the thing with films is they want stuff to keep happening all the time. Stuff always has to happen. And a lot of the time with that, they end up cutting out bits of script that would have given you more of the personality of the people involved. And when films go wrong, I think it's because the characters end up being a bit bland. It's why the Justice League film, personally, for me, didn't work, whereas the Avengers films do. Because the Avengers films, the Marvel films, are brilliant, I think, it's really quickly done, but you get the personality of the characters and you start to care about them. It's like, if anyone's a Marvel geek, the 3 Thor films are a good example. The first 2 Thor films, he was always my favorite superhero. The first 2 Thor films were sort of, nah. First one was okay, second one was a bit poor. And then they kind of rebooted it in Thor Ragnarok with a brilliant writer-director, New Zealand. What's the New Zealand guy called?
Waititi, is it?
Well, yeah, exactly. And he's brilliant. And but they just put some humor in it, and they put the character. They gave him some more character where he became this sort of bit of a ridiculous character, but a lovably ridiculous character. And that just improved it immeasurably, because it's like they found the character, and then you started caring about that, and it went from being films that people were like to loving the last Thor film. I thought was wonderful. It's one of my all-time favorites. I mean, not just Marvel films, of any film. So yeah, but that all came from what they did wrong on the first 2 was the character was bland. What they did right on the third one was they gave him some personality, and the thing took off.
And I would say, I mean, Caimh isn't one of the judges on the tournament, but it might be worth avoiding having a border reaver sitting up in the back of a car.
No.
In case he gets involved.
I mean, unless you can find a fun way of doing it. That's the thing. Like, I like taking stuff like that and then kind of making it a bit ridiculous and sort of like it becoming a key point. But like, there's that thing where people say, "Oh, avoid certain tropes," as they call them. Tropes is always this weird thing, tropes are things that happen in like a lot of detective novels. Certain things will happen there. That's what's called a trope if it happens again and again. And to be fair, the great thing about how I write, because I write sort of funnier books, is I literally kind of take tropes, and those things will happen, but I can then have people referring to, this is the kind of thing that would happen in a detective novel. And it's kind of, when you do that right, it works well. And it's a lot of fun that you can sort of, once you know these rules, you can break them and have fun doing it, which is always great crack.
Great. Well, in a minute we're going to have Red Lucy from the Red Lucy podcast pop on and ask you a question. So we'll have a little transition, and she'll pop up in a second.
As a comedian, is humour something that naturally comes in your writing? Is it something you like to put in or try to avoid?
Excellent question. Thank you. I think the thing with humor is generally, if you're the kind of person who sort of, I guess it comes naturally to, it basically kind of happens on its own. Like, I don't really sit down when I'm planning a story. I plan what happens in the story. I don't particularly plan that, oh, I need this to happen for it to be funny. Um, for example, if you're writing a story, I'd say one of the big things about writing comedy, if you're writing comedy, if you're writing a story and something only happens, like two people only go into a room and there's something there, and the only reason is because there's a joke you want to do, then that's where comedy goes wrong. What comedy should be is basically the story's going from A to B to C, and comedy is the thing that happens along the way. So I always say, for example, and this is a thing a lot of people don't like, but I'm convinced it's true. Comedy is not a genre of book or film or whatever. I think it's a style. What that means is you write a crime book, and you do write a crime book where there has to be a crime and they have to solve it and stuff. And the comedy element comes in is that you deal with it in a different way. So yeah, I kind of, it's just the way my brain works. I've been doing comedy since I was, since I was a kid. I was always trying to be funny. I was the annoying kid who was constantly trying to be funny, and it's just been in my head that I became a stand-up comedian. So it's in me. So it's kind of fairly natural. And I think it just sort of happens. But the important thing about, as you were saying, the question about having it happen and not happen, I think one of the things I had to learn, particularly when I started writing books, is when not to have it happen. When, like, for example, when things are really tense and the characters are in trouble and stuff like that, you've got to be then a lot more careful. You can still do jokes and you can still have them, but you have to make sure they're more rightly timed. Because if it goes, where it goes wrong is if a joke happens there, it could lower the tension, and all of a sudden you're not as worried about them getting out of it because it doesn't feel like they're ever really in danger. When that happens, you're doing it wrong. So you need to make sure you're keeping the tension going, and then if the jokes are taken away, then you need to be able to figure out how to take them out. But yeah, that's where the important thing was with that.
So I thought it was a really good question, especially because you often hear that I've heard that publishers don't like comedy, or maybe comedy books, but what you're saying is not that you're going out to write a comedy book, but you're just inserting humor into a genre book, which is
I mean, it's one of these things that I'm a huge fan of Terry Pratchett and Douglas Adams, all those two massive heroes of mine. And the thing with their books, even like Douglas Adams' books are wild and crazy and lots of stuff's happening, but he is still telling the story. And that's always the thing, that the story is the thing. And Terry Pratchett books, there's always a very distinctive story that it's following. And then the comedy happens along the way. I mean, you do, look, I had stuff about publishers not wanting to have comedy. Well, yeah, I'd like to think we've maybe proven our point there a little bit, where that's no longer. Well, my first book, we published it ourselves. My bunny books and all them, because nobody was like publishing and stuff was a bit wary because they're funny and no, and they've gone on to thankfully sell well, and they've got following around the world. We're really lucky in that regard. But a large part of that is the fact that weirdly publishing doesn't do that kind of book. So when people found us, they got excited about it because they couldn't find them everywhere else. So it's one of these things you'll hear a lot about, in various different things about, oh, you can't do this and you can't do that, and this genre book is gone. Like, take for example, if you like dinosaur things, people go, dinosaurs have been done to death and nobody cares about dinosaurs anymore. I guarantee you, write the dinosaur thing, everything comes back into fashion. And when you do, you're the person who's sitting there with the great dinosaur idea. Anything like that, if you find a fresh way of doing it, people will respond, and never worry about. There's a lot as a writer. If I can give one piece of advice, there's a lot of things that will tell coming from you and coming from outside. There'll be negatives saying, "Oh, this isn't very good," or "You're not very good," or there's all these negative things. And a huge part of becoming a writer is you have to be able to figure out a way of going, do you know what? I'm not going to worry about those things. I'm going to do this. And I'm going to write this. And as long as you basically, my thing is, every book I write for me. Like I've always asked about you aiming at this. Now I write for me because I want to read it. It's a book I would enjoy reading, and I want to find out what happens in that story. And it's also a great way of dealing with any kind of negativity from either outside or inside yourself, which we all have. Is you just going to go, no, I'm just going to do this. I'm going to enjoy myself. I'm going to, and writing should be fun. Just embrace the joy of telling yourself the story, and then other people will enjoy it as well. But don't second guess yourself, and don't worry if anyone negative and stuff like that. Like, you got to take on criticism. That's fine. But don't let it discourage you. Just go, okay, because, loads of people, like every great author you can name, you can go on Amazon and read all the 1-star reviews with people telling them they're awful. I got a great 1-star review on the Stranger Times recently. Genuinely, somebody said, I don't know if this is supposed to be funny. Maybe if you like Terry Pratchett stuff, this might be the kind of thing you'd like. And I was delighted, because I think Terry Pratchett's my all-time favorite author in history. And if somebody doesn't like Terry Pratchett and did like me, I would be worried.
He's just directed on.
So my point.
So that's handy.
Yeah, and exactly. He's like, it's a great advert. I genuinely would put it in, I would put it in an advert tomorrow if my wife would let me. Yeah, but my point was, any kind of, when you're writing, don't let your own negativity disrupt. As always, just enjoy what you do, keep working towards it. And the achievement in itself is just finishing something. So always keep pushing forward with stuff like that, and don't let other people's negativity worry you. And, we all have it in ourselves as well to be kind of worried. That's just a natural thing. But I think one of the big things is just understand, when you're doubting yourself, every other writer, I guarantee you, doubts themselves. So it's one of those things that I think if you know that, it helps, because there is, and there's so many examples. Stephen King has talked about it. There's a guy called Ian Rankin, which the audience might not know, but he's a very popular crime writer, and he's Scottish, but he's very popular the world over. But there's an amazing video somewhere of every time he's writing a book, and he basically has this thing. He was interviewed with him, and I think his wife, or maybe he was referring to the wife, but basically he was like, I'm 2/3 the way through, it's not working. And he went in the kitchen, so his wife says, it's just, I'm gonna have to abandon it, it's not working. And he's like, what page are you at? About page 200? And he's like, yeah, just about, yeah, this happens every time. And he's like, well, no, every time you think you get 2/3 the way through your book, you think it's terrible and you have to abandon it. You're exactly on schedule. This is exactly what you think every time. And he sort of said, it helps to figure when you realize that. But that's a man who's sold millions of books and has won every award going, and is lauded quite rightly for being a genius of the genre. And even he has the doubts. So I think it's one of these things that once you understand everybody has the doubts, just try not to worry about them and just understand it's part of the process.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you for that, Red Lucy. So question 5. Okay. So, so got that bit. So question 5. Most people who decide to pursue a career in writing have an unrealistic view of what that entails. That was me. I'm sure many other people. So you've done a lot of things over many years, but I suppose in relation to, well, whatever, I suppose, in your writing career, the sort of highs and lows of your journey, and what maybe people can expect going into pursuing that kind of career.
Yeah, I mean, it's not an easy career. Nothing in the arts is. But as I sort of said, you do with the doubt and stuff, and people second guessing you. I mean, I've had loads of highs and lows along the way, I guess. I think it can be challenging, but it's also a lot of fun. I mean, that's the thing. I think as long as you enjoy what you're doing, then you'll be okay. And yeah, if you enjoy writing, I think that's the main thing. And you sort of, everything else you can learn along the way. It is, it can be, there's lots of highs and lows in any kind of art. Like when I was in stand-up comedy, you'd have massive, I mean, when a stand-up comedy gig goes well, you are just buzzing, like with adrenaline. You can't get to sleep for 6 hours afterwards. Like, I can remember doing the Comedy Store in London, which was my all-time favorite venue. Like it was, it's sort of like, it's the big thing. And I did a weekend at the Comedy Store in London. That went well. I don't think I slept most of that weekend though. I was having such a hard time just getting rid of the adrenaline. I literally went home and I think slept for 2 days afterwards because it was so much adrenaline sort of thing. But when it goes badly, it's, oh my God, is it bad? When you do not go well as a stand-up comedian, it hurts your soul. So and same, writing is not as visceral as that, thankfully. But I think it's one of these things that the biggest thing I can say is a lot of the way through, and bear in mind, I've been doing this now for 25 years. The amount of times I thought someone was wasted and didn't, this is gone nothing. And I've had, things that look like they might get on TV and didn't get on TV. You think, oh, so much wasted stuff. I can honestly say now, and this is only something that really in the last couple of years I've realized, that honestly, none of it was wasted. Genuinely, it isn't. If you write anything, be it a script, be it a short story, be it a novel, even if it doesn't go anywhere directly and it doesn't get made and it doesn't get published, the fact you did it really does help. Like the Stranger Times, as we were discussing, is now, it's been very lucky. We got like deals here in Germany. It's got option for TV and stuff. The Stranger Times, under a slightly different name, was something I wrote 10, 15 years ago as a sitcom script that my agent at the time didn't understand or like. And I don't think it even went out to, she was like, nah. And she did nothing with it. And I always had the idea in my head. And that came around again. And I started to write the book. And bizarrely, it works as a book. I'm very proud of it. But that was something that looked like a complete dead end that I did 15 years ago that wasn't even a footnote. I can't even find the original script. I went looking for it. It's really annoying. I can find all these other scripts I wrote. But the Stranger Times script has disappeared because it would have been quite a fun thing to show people. But the point is, everything you write and everything you work at, it does help. It might not feel it at the time. It might feel like, oh, that went nowhere and stuff. And as long as you enjoy what you're doing, if you enjoy it and then keep doing, you do get better at it. And it's always, and I've got lots of friends who are like more in stand-up comedy, but I think it's equally applicable, where they've never made a full-time living out of it, maybe, but they've done it part-time and it's become a big part of their lives and it's something they enjoy and they genuinely love. And ultimately everything in life, whatever, having a career and stuff, if you find something that makes you a happier person or fulfills you doing something different, then that's brilliant. And whether it ends up being your career or not is really secondary, because life's made up of a lot of different parts. But always, if you've got that urge, it's always something you should do and find the time to do, because it makes you happier as a person. As my wife regularly says, it's good that I make up stories for a living, because otherwise my imagination would be completely wasted. I wouldn't know what to do with myself. I'd be sitting there making up things in my own head going nowhere. Whereas I've found my outlet, and that's a wonderful thing. So, look, working in the arts is hard. And you hear a lot recently about it's harder than ever to become an actor or to publish or get published in a book and all these sort of things. And the reality is, honestly, it's always been hard to become a professional stand-up comedian and stuff. Has it got harder? In some ways, yes. In some ways, no. But the best piece of advice I can give is don't worry about how hard something is. If you want to do it, then go do it. And just enjoy it. And if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. And if it's not, you'll still have enjoyed yourself. And when you're old and grey, sitting here 100 years old, sitting on your porch staring out, nobody's going to regret doing the thing they love to do, even if it didn't go anywhere, because those are the things that make up a life. So just enjoy yourself. That's my advice.
Yeah, great. And if you're really not enjoying it, then go and get a job that you hate and do that for years, and then you'll soon come around.
Yeah, exactly. And if it's, I've always, to be honest, and I've said this before, I'm always wary of getting in trouble, because I've read there are a lot of authors who talk about how hard it is to write and how painful the process is. And I always think, oh, just go do something else, because I enjoy it. Like, I genuinely, this is like, I'm in my office at the minute. This is my playpen. I get to come here and make up stories. This is the only thing I've ever really been good at my entire life. And the fact that I get to do it and people share them is a lovely thing. And I've honestly always really enjoyed the process. And if you can, I mean, a lot of people don't, but if you can, do try and enjoy yourself.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know if you want me to mention, I can cut this bit out, but just that when you're referring to you're talking about yourself and Wonder Wife, do you?
Oh yeah, myself, my Wonder Wife is my, basically my wife is, I'm very lucky, she's an English degree and marketing degree and stuff. So she basically became full-time. She's sort of she's not actually my editor, but she's in charge of all the editing. So she's the first reader of the books, and she runs our business with me. So the two of us do stuff together, which is great. I mean, obviously my poor wife has to put up with dealing with me all the time, but generally she gets to go out for a walk and calm down, and she hasn't killed me yet, and fingers crossed she won't.
So, question 6. So I've written very long questions here. You've had success as an indie author, and now as a traditionally published author, your book, Stranger Times, is flying the charts. Your books have also been nominated for awards. Not everyone in the writing tournament or any other award can make the next round or win. What advice would you give to those young writers?
I mean, as kind of a little bit, as I said before, is look, there's always, you're not always going to win everything, and we all want to. You should be excited about going in and thinking you've got a chance and stuff. But if you've written a story, that's the win. That's right there is, because somebody decides, putting in a competition, there's always different opinions. These things are a little bit of a lottery. But if you've written that story is going to exist for the rest of the time. And not to be, but stories are fundamental to human existence, and it's how stories are how we sort of, if you look back at the oldest things, caves. If you look at caves in Australia, of all the Aboriginal art and stuff they find that's thousands of years old, and it's like it's carved into rocks. All those things on rocks, they're all stories. They're all people, the first attempts to tell people stories. So if you wrote a story, congratulations, that's a great thing in itself, and that's something you'll have. And look, you've written a story, you've enjoyed the process, hopefully, write another one. It's always about the next thing. It's always about, that's how, right, there's a cliche thing that say writers write, but that's the truth. If you want to be a writer, you just keep writing. And it doesn't matter what your first story is like or your fifth story is like. What matters is that you get better every time by working at it, enjoying it, taking the feedback on board you'll undoubtedly get, and you will get better and better at it, and it's a great fun thing to be able to do. So just enjoy the process.
Great.
And then you should, I presume you can read everybody else's if you get the chance as well, because it's good if you're all given the same thing. It's interesting to see how different people approach stuff. So absolutely read everyone else's, and you will learn from that. And it's all really positive. And the whole point of all these things is great, because it gives you, the great thing with competitions are, it gives you something to aim for. It gives you, right, I need to write a story about this and get it done by this date. Because actually people think if you go to somebody, you can write anything. That's actually quite hard. Because then you're going, oh, there's so much possibility. But if you go to me and go, right, you've got to write a story about a dog, his name's this, and it's got to be 2,000 words most, and the dog has to learn a valuable this, all these kind of different things. You go, okay. And then it focuses your mind, and it's actually a lot easier to come up with a story when you've got a limited scope. So the great thing with competitions is they'll give you a prompt and they'll give you a deadline. You go, right, I need to get stuff done, because the human mind works in such a way that it wanders around on its own, never getting anything done, unless somebody gives it a kick up the backside in the most polite way possible and tells it to get something done by this time. And that's competitions are great for that.
Okay, so so this is an interesting one. Although you have stripped your room a little bit bare, I was going to see if you can give us a quick talk through if there's anything interesting in your writing room that you might want to share.
Well, normally I'm sort of between books. Normally what you'd see behind you is a full chipboard thing full of cards, which is what I sort of plan things out on cards. Unfortunately, it's been warm here and the sun comes in and loads of, you can see that bright areas where tiles have started to fall off the wall. But what I do is I generally get cards with different colors and I pin them up for different chapters and different scenes. And that's all very useful. I also do, I've started doing recently, this is my other headset, which is for dictation. So I now sit here, instead of writing, I actually sit here and talk. And I have software on my Mac that understands my voice, kind of.
Always. You don't type anymore?
Well, I do. I type like when I'm reworking it and when I'm doing editing and stuff. But for the first thing, I just sort of, I dictate it, and then I kind of come back and fix it later on, which is great. And but that's the general thing is I do plan things out on that, as I said, and stuff. And the good thing when you're writing, I mean, people do all this stuff where they go to like certain places and just put headphones on and stuff. I'm weird where I like no distractions whatsoever. I can't write with other people in the room because I'm distracted by them. The only thing that could be in the room is there's my dog's bed is behind me. He will occasionally come down and fall asleep behind me. And that is the only life form that's ever been in the room while I'm writing recently. I used to have a shared office, but yeah, now the dog's the only one who comes in. And even he gets bored fairly quickly, to be honest. But yeah, so that's why normally it is a lot more exciting that there's cards up there and there's all these notes on the cards and stuff. But unfortunately, I'm just starting a book today. So there's currently nothing but open blank space.
Yeah. Oh, that's exciting. Exciting blank space to fill.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah. So just quickly, what dictation software do you use for anyone who would like to try that?
It's what's it called again? I use God, I've forgotten the name. Hang on, let me just tell you.
The Dragon.
Dragon.
Oh,
that's the one, yeah. And I use Dragon, and these things are always my accent isn't the easiest for it to understand. It's kind of made for an American, and there's certain words that it really has a hard time with me saying. But it is good because you can teach it and stuff, and it doesn't come back perfect, but it's also I always thought it would be impossible to do. Like Ian Sainsbury, I'm sure you know as well, as a mate of mine, and he used to use it, and other people used it. And I was like, I wouldn't understand how you could possibly do dictation. And I literally just had some problems with my back. It's the joys of being a 45-year-old man. I had some problems with my back because I was bent over typing all the time. And I just decided to give it a go, just using headphones and any old piece of software I think I found on my Mac. And it kind of worked okay. And you have to do things like you have to say full stop at the end of a sentence and commas and things like that. But I've actually found that you get used to that pretty fast. And I was surprised, and it really it has helped me. And it's just a different way of doing stuff. It's kind of anything that can kind of get you moving is a good thing, I always think.
Yeah, it's interesting to compare the writing, typing versus speech. And
well, one of my big things was I was worried that it would read differently. Like I was like, so I recently, the book that's coming out in a couple of weeks, I dictated that, and that's the first book I've dictated. And I was worried that it might come out differently, or it might be a bit waffly in places, or it wouldn't. And honestly, like it's gone through all of my editors, and none of them. Yeah, even the editors said, if you hadn't told me, I wouldn't have known there was any different method here at all. It ends up coming out the same at the end, which is good.
Great. So final question. I think I gave you a heads up with this, and we'll see. So the theme of the writing tournament, we've been asking most of the people that were interviewing for the tournament, the authors. The theme is the border reivers, who are a lawless bunch who did what they could to survive on the Anglo-Scottish border. So if you had 500 words to tell a story about them, what would the story be in a nutshell? Well,
if you just gave me border reivers, and that was the prompt, because I understand and I know what they were, but I would probably take a broader definition, because I would basically do a version of they live on a border between. There's all kinds of borders. There's borders between different realities. There's borders between life and death, if you want. There's all those things. So I would probably, the way my brain works is I would instantly start looking at what borders there are, and could I do something between, something different with that. I think my instinct was I like the border between life and death, because I've written the fantasy books where you do have, people, ghosts and stuff like that. So I think my border reivers thing is that would basically, to me, I would think ghost would be somebody crossing the border between life and death, or death and life coming that way. And I'd quite like the idea of doing something with that.
Okay, yeah.
So maybe somebody being haunted by a ghost, that would probably be where I go with it.
Yeah. Oh, very interesting. I'll keep a note of all these in case I run out of material, and then I can. Well, thank you, Caimh. That's been really enlightening and interesting. You've obviously had a lot of experience, and you've managed to share that with us. So thank you very much, and look forward
to
reading more of your work.
Thank you very much, and I hope everyone enjoys writing their short stories. And congratulations if you get one done. Fair play, and best of luck.
Lovely. Take care of yourself.
Bye-bye.